Hey, welcome back, guys. So now we're going to go over, or I'm going to teach you how to animate your enemies. So like create the game objects and then also turn them into a prefab. And that basically means you can just reuse that object the way you created it over and over without having to worry about it. And if you have multiple versions of that object on your screen or on your scene editor, you can change it all in one place and it'll take effect all over. So why don't we get started and let's open our project where we left off. And all this should look very familiar to you. Let's see, where do we want to start? We're going to start with the animations of our first enemy, okay? So let's go ahead and just create a new empty object. And let's name this Enemy 1. It's very creative, I know. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is go into our sprite folder, and let's go ahead and just, expand Enemy 1, and we're going to go into our first, let's think about this. I don't think we actually need all of their animations that our assets came with. So we definitely need them to walk. We need them to get hurt because they are going to be hit with arrows, and we're also going to need them to die. Maybe idle. Let's start with walk. Let's do hurt, and let's do dying for sure right now. So go ahead and click on walking, and just click on the first one here. Hold shift to highlight them all. And we just drag them to our game object. Make sure they go into Enemy 1. Okay, and it knows we want to make an animation, so that's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and call this walking. And let's pick a folder to put it in. And we already created our two animation folders, if you remember. Let's just back out a little. Animation. Okay, we're going to just select animations and hit save. Now it's going to create a walking animation, and it's also going to create the animator controller. So here's the walking animation with the play sign, and then the controller for this enemy was also created. And we can go ahead and drag that into animator controller. So now walking is in animations, and animator controller for Enemy 1 is in the proper folder. So let's go ahead and do hurt now. So if we select all these, and we're going to do the same thing as before, drag all of them into Enemy 1, and let's name this animation, and we'll just call it hurt. So save. And let's see. Okay, so it placed hurt in our animations folder, and this time there's no controller. So this controller, it only gets created once per object, and that's pretty cool. If we double click on this, you'll see that here's our walking animation and here's our hurt animation. And basically we'll learn in code later how to switch between these all. And if you right click a gray one, you can see set as layer default state, and that's why walking is orange. That's currently set as the default state of character 1, and that's good. We want him to be walking for his default animation. All right, let's go ahead and now do the dying one. So select all these, and same thing as before, drag it in, and let's call this dying. And save. So there you go. You see dying show up there, and our dying animation is here. All right, so let's go ahead and drag this player on the board just to see what he looks like. Oh, you know what I forgot to do? We need a default sprite so we know what this enemy looks like. So if we drag this out right now, actually he's already on our board. He's right here. So we don't see anything, obviously. We need a default sprite that shows up when we're not running our game. So if you have them highlighted over here, you'll see sprite as none. We can just go into any of these. Why don't we go into idle and just pick idle 0 and just drag that into sprite right here where it says none. And there we go. Now we see him. And what do you guys notice? He's gigantic. So we're going to do the same thing we did before where we make the pixels smaller, the pixels per unit. And I'm going to go ahead and just, we'll start at the top for attacking. Let's select all of these. And for this one, we're just going to make it 500 and hit apply. And we're not going to see anything change yet until we get to idle. Why don't we get idle out of the way just so we know if 500 was the right number. And the way I found this number was just playing around and, deciding what I thought felt right. And there we go. So there he is, nice and small. He fits on the path. I think that's pretty awesome. So let's go ahead and do this for all of them. 500. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and do the same thing for enemy 2, 500. And then let's go ahead and get this done for enemy 3 as well. And then we are done setting up our sprite sizes for our enemy. In fact, I think we're done for all the sprites we have imported at the moment. All right, if I finish too fast for you, go ahead and pause the video, get caught up, and we're just going to continue straight on right now. And so the cool thing is we have this object, right? But if I deleted this object, we would lose all the animations and all that good stuff. And you can see the animator controller is connected to enemy 1 here. So when we added those animations, it connected all this for us, which is pretty cool. So if we deleted this, we would lose all that and we'd have to remake this enemy. So right now, if you take this and drag this into your prefabs folder, it now made the enemy a reusable prefab object. So I can delete this. Oh, and did you see how it turns blue? See how map is black? This is now blue. That's how you know you're using a prefab. So that's pretty cool. We can delete this, delete on Windows or command backspace on a Mac. And all we have to do is take our enemy and prefabs folder and drag it out. And there it is. That's pretty freaking cool. I'm going to show you one thing just so you guys can see that our animations are already working for this guy. So he's sitting there. I'm going to go ahead and maximize the video player, the game player, when I press run so you can see it on the full screen. And it's going to run. And look at him walking. That's pretty cool, right? Look at that. You made your first animation in your 2D world. That's pretty exciting. All right, so go ahead and stop running this. And we can delete this object. We don't need it anymore. Okay, so now we're going to create enemy 2. So what we'll do is create an empty object. Same as before. It's all repetition right now, which I'm sorry, but it's going to be worth it. I promise. So enemy 2. And go ahead and expand enemy 2 here. And let's do the walking animation first. So go ahead and select all of these and drag them onto enemy 2. And let's call this walking 2 because we already have one called walking, right? And let's we have to save this to our other folders. Let's go into assets. Okay, the assets and then animations. And let's go ahead and save it to animations with all of our others. So walking 2, and we had to name it 2 because we already have a walking. We don't want to override that because they're different PNGs, right? Or different sprites now. Once we drag those in, they've turned into sprites. So hit save. And then we are going to also do, let's see, hurt. So select all those and drag those into enemy 2 and call this hurt 2. And it's already in the right folder, so go ahead and hit save. And then we need a dying one, so go ahead and select all the dying animations or PNGs and drag those into enemy 2. And let's call those dying 2. All right, so we have enemy 2. This object would work right now. If we dragged it onto the board, we'd see enemy 2 move. But I'm going to do one more thing. So remember when we created the first animation, it created enemy 1 controller. Well, this one also created a controller for enemy 2. But the problem with this is it created, look, a whole nother board of animations we already know. Like, we're like repeating ourselves right now, and we don't want that. So let's go ahead and delete enemy 2. Okay. Don't worry. Don't delete any of the animations that we created. Go into Animator Controller, and underneath enemy 1, right click and go to Create and go to Animator Override Controller. Okay. And we're going to call this enemy 2. And what's cool about the Animator Controller is it just overrides a controller you already have made. So we want it to override enemy 1. So if we go ahead and have enemy 2 selected, you can hit this little lock button here so it doesn't change. And we can drag enemy 1 into it. And look at that. That's pretty sweet. One thing we have to do is, these are the originals. See how it's called walking, hurt, and dying? We need walking 2, hurt 2, and dying 2, right? So click that little dot next to it. And I don't know why this window always opens up way over there. Now we need to select walking 2. There it goes. And then click the hurt dot and pick hurt 2. And then hit the third dot next to dying and hit dying 2. And we can close that. You can save everything. And now we only have one animator controller, and we have 2 enemies, which is really sweet. And let's go ahead and make enemy 2 a prefab quick so we don't have to worry about deleting them. And let's drag our enemy 2 onto the board, which he already is. Let's move him so we can see him. Oh, we can't see him again. So we have to set his, I have this locked over here. So hit this lock in the upper right corner to unlock it so we can see enemy 2's inspector. And let's go to enemy 2 idle and take 0, 0, 0 again and put it in the sprite. And now we see enemy 2 on the board. So enemy 2's there, and for fun, let's go ahead and drag enemy 1 back out there. I shouldn't have deleted them because now we can see both of them. I like to call enemy 2 Scully, and enemy 1 I like to call Horny. Evan laughs because his name's Horny. Let's go ahead and press play, and we can see both of them. Uh-oh, our Scully is not walking. So let's figure out what we did. All right, so enemy 2 has... All right. Oh, okay. So in our object, we also have to put a controller in place. Since we deleted the one that automatically got created with the animator when we made our first animation, it lost track of the controller. So if we click the little arrow, the little dot next to it, it opens up the same way that we did the animations, right? And we want to pick enemy 2. All right. So now that enemy 2's there, go ahead and save it, and let's run it again, and now Scully will be walking with Horny. And look at them go. They're ready to try to beat you at this game, and we're not going to let them, hopefully. I don't know. All right, so let's stop this, and we have one more enemy to make. And we'll leave them all up there so, you know, it's cool to see them move, right? So go ahead and create a new empty object. Let's name this one enemy 3. All right, there's that. And let's start with walking. So go ahead and select all the walking PNGs and drag them over to enemy Sometimes it just doesn't like me. So just reselect them and drag them over. There we go. All right, and we will call this walking 3. And we will save this in our animations folder. There we go. And ta-da. So that is done. And now let's go ahead and do hurt. And we'll call this hurt 3. Remember, it's important to call them different things because they all have their own PNGs that are part of their animations. If they all use the same animations that we created, they would change and look like the other enemy. All right, and now we need to do dying. So go ahead and select all the dying ones and drag those to enemy 3. And let's call this dying 3 and save that. All right, so we're almost there. Oh, we're not going to forget this time. We need to grab the idle image and drag it into the sprite for enemy 3. Well, it's selected. So go ahead and drag that right here. And let's go ahead and drag this guy so we can see him. And there's Spike. So the 3 buddies are together. They're really excited to, march down this path. Now we have to go into our animations folder. And we need to delete the enemy 3 controller again. So command backspace or delete if you're on Windows and get rid of that. And then go to your animator controller, right click and hit create animator override controller. And we'll call this enemy 3. All right. And enemy 3 is going to override from enemy 1 again, because enemy 1 is the only animator that we're using right now. And then we have to change the animations to walking 3, hurt 3, and dying 3. And then we're done with that. And if we click on enemy 3, you'll notice that under the animator, it also lost its controller. So go ahead and you can just hit this little dot next to it and select enemy 3 and then close this. All right, so now let's make enemy 3 a prefab so we don't have to worry about deleting it. And I'm going to show you something that's really cool. For whatever reason, so we have enemy 3 out there. Let's pretend we have like a couple enemy 3s, right? If you select the prefab, not from the hierarchy, well, you could also choose from the hierarchy. But if you select the prefab and let's make the scale 2 instead of 1. Look at that. It changes both of them on the scene, like just like that, which is pretty cool. All right, so we'll put them back. And also, if you were to pick, player 3 on here and change the scale, it changes the 1, but you can also click apply here and it applies it to the prefab. So there's a couple ways you can do it, which is really cool. And that is why prefabs are so cool. All right, let's go ahead and play this so you can see all 3 of these guys. Animations. Look at that. They're all marching. And our goal we might hit it in this video. We're going to start writing some scripts to actually show them how to walk. I'm thinking it'll be the next video because we have a couple more things to do before we're ready to write scripts. We need to know like how we're directing them on the path. So we're getting there. This is pretty cool. Let's go ahead and delete these enemies. Okay, just leave your map on there and we are good to go. All right, so we're ready to start putting we're going to put references on this path so our enemies are directed and they know where to walk. First things first, I need to see more of this screen. So let's zoom out. There we go. All right, so you can place empty objects that go on the screen and when it runs, you can't see them. So if we create an empty object, first we need a place for our enemies to spawn, right? So let's name this empty object spawn. And if you come over here, next to spawn, if you have it highlighted, come over in the inspector and click on this cube. We can create a color. So if we make it blue, let's say. All right, so we have our spawn point now. And it's a nice label. It looks like a nice capsule. And let's just move it over to this path right here, okay? So we have this awesome little thing. It's a label, and these won't show up when you run your game. So they're kind of like little references that you can use. And it's cool. It's nice. It's sweet. And let's go ahead and give this a tag. There's already a built-in tag that we want called respawn. So we're going to go ahead and use that, okay? And layer is fine for default. It doesn't need to be anything special. And then let's go ahead and make this a prefab just because I do it for most things. And then let's create one more empty object, and let's call this one exit. All right. So if this is exit, we need we can use the finish tag for it. And let's go ahead and make this one red. And if we move this is going to be the exit, right? They're going to get up here and they're done. All right. So one thing that we need to learn how to do is we need to learn how to use 2D colliders, and not to be mistaken with colliders in the 3D world. There are colliders for 3D and there are colliders for 2D. They do not work together. So if you have 3D colliders and 2D colliders all in one game, they won't detect each other, okay? So if you're in a 2D world, use all the 2D stuff. If you're in the 3D world, use all the 3D. And the difference is when you're in a 3D, your like ground surface is on the XZ plane. And when you're in the 2D world, you're in the XY plane. And so we don't use the Z plane in 2D, obviously. So that is the reason for that. So with exit selected, we need to add a 2D a physics 2D collider, and you hit add component when it's selected and go to physics 2D. All right. And we just need a simple box collider 2D. So click on that. And an important thing to know is triggered means like an object won't hit it. It will allow an object to pass through it and just, it'll set a trigger event so you can, have other code go, or, in this case, when they hit exit, we're going to have to destroy the game object so it doesn't keep living in the afterlife of off the screen when we can't see it anymore. So go ahead and select is triggered, and we'll be diving into this a little more in the next video or the next two videos, depending on how long it takes. So go ahead and do that. And then the size, we can see this little green box around it? We can make it really small. The width is fine, but let's go ahead and make it a lot thinner. If we do like I went the wrong way. Let's change the Y to like 0.3. And there we go. It's off the scene, but it's like right there. So our characters are still going to hit it. So when they hit it, they will disappear. And so 0.3 is good. And that box collider is done. All right. So now you've probably guessed it because I have mentioned it before. Let's go ahead and make this exit also a prefab. And we're going to make a bunch of like checkpoints at every corner so we can walk our enemy to the nearest checkpoint. So it can path find, and when it gets there, it'll path find to the next one. And this is just a really nice way there are other ways of doing it, but to follow like an exact line to make it look like our enemies are walking on the path, this is the easiest way. And we're going to create more empty objects, and this time we're going to call them checkpoint. Let's create one just called checkpoints, and we'll put a bunch of checkpoints in checkpoints. All right. So create another empty one after that, and let's call this checkpoint 1. All right. And for checkpoint 1, let's go ahead and give it a color. I don't know. I think checkpoints could be orange. Yeah, that looks nice. And let's give it a tag. All right. None of these tags are really what we want. So let's go ahead and give this a tag, and we're going to call it checkpoint. So hit the plus arrow here, and let's add a new tag called checkpoint. All right, so that is that. You know, I've noticed the default ones are all capitalized. Oh, that's all right. We'll leave it lowercase. We can do lowercase everywhere. And all right, so that's checkpoint 1, right? And let's go ahead and move checkpoint 1 to the first bend. All right, so right there looks good. And we need something that we, you know, on the same thing that we did exit, we need a 2D collider. So go ahead and add a component, physics 2D, and then a simple box collider will do. And you'll see that box is huge. So if the enemy hit it, right when he hits that edge, he's going to want to turn then with. So we're going to want to make this box a lot smaller because they're going to be walking down the middle of the path. So let's go ahead and make this like 0.1 by 0.1. Let's do 0.2 by 0.2 to be safe. We can always come back and change that number, like if our guys are missing it and they just stop when they get there. But yeah, and we also want this is triggered. Like I said, like if our enemies are going to have rigid bodies and colliders attached to them, and if they're both colliders that aren't being triggered, they'll act like masses, and the enemy would walk into it and just start pushing the object around, and we want him to pass through it. So check triggered here, and let's go ahead and, you know, let's name this just checkpoint, okay? Because now we can make this a prefab. And let's go ahead and drag it into our prefab folder. All right, so now if we click from our prefabs over here. All right, cool. So now we have checkpoint 1. And there we go. And go ahead and copy and paste checkpoint 2 and just slide this over to this corner. Copy and paste and slide checkpoint 3 down. Copy and paste checkpoint 4. And we're going to leave these numbers on them. Copy and paste down, because we're going to be adding these to an array later, and we want them in a specific order, so it'll just be easier for us if we can see numbers. So go ahead and put a checkpoint, the center of it kind of, towards the center of the corner. And there we go. We have 9 checkpoints. Pretty cool. All right, save. And let's go ahead and select all of these and just put them inside this checkpoint object we made, and that'll just clean it up nice and get it out of our way. All right, so we're getting there. Like, we're almost ready to write code, and we're really close to having everything set up. Okay, I'm going to go ahead. I think this is a good time to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to get our enemies set up with colliders and also a 2D rigid body, and then we'll start moving on to having those guys spawn, and then we'll have them move, transform from a checkpoint to checkpoint. It'll be really cool, and I'll see you guys shortly.